All right. And I'll turn it over to Sarah, and I'll go ahead and hop off and just hide in the background here if anyone needs
Sounds
anything.
good. Thanks for your help, Danny. All right. Hello, all. I'll just give everyone a minute to kind of filter in. Hello. Feel free to use that chat box to let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know. Tuning in from LA, Tennessee. All right. Seattle. Oh my gosh, we're covering so many time zones. Hawthorne, San Mateo. Nice. Anaheim. Welcome, welcome. Well, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and welcome to our AVG Pre-Apprenticeship Speaker Series. My name is Sarah. I'm BRIC's Director of Communications and your moderator for today. And this speaker series from the BRIC Foundation aims to provide early career awareness about all the different careers that exist across animation, visual effects, and gaming. We're really feeling bittersweet about today's because this is the last in our series for this school year. But we will pick this back up in September when the school year starts again. But for today, we have a fantastic presentation all about development by Sony Pictures Animation's Chelsea Itaya, followed by an audience Q&A towards the end of the session. So definitely make sure to use that Q&A function on Zoom to ask us your questions along the way. To introduce Chelsea, she is currently a creative executive at Sony Pictures Animation's series development department and has previously worked at Warner Brothers Entertainment, Paramount Animation, On Animation, among others. She's really passionate about helping underrepresented groups get those coveted director, writer, producer positions, and has worked with a lot of great organizations, including ours, but also Women in Animation, Native American Animation Lab, Good City Mentors, and Rise Up Animation, which I'm sure you've heard of, in an effort to make that happen. So Chelsea, welcome. Welcome to our series, and please feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Chelsea Itaya, and like Sarah said, I'm a creative executive at Sony Pictures Animation, and I'm excited to talk to you today about what the heck that means and what a creative executive actually does. But I thought it would first be helpful to share a little bit of my background, just so you can kind of see that you don't need to go to film school to do this job necessarily. And I think that every single person I've met in the entertainment industry has super windy paths of getting to where they got to. But I went to UC Berkeley for college, and I studied business there because I thought I wanted to go into entertainment marketing, and that seemed to me at the time to be the closest thing to marketing. But to be honest, I didn't even know at the time what entertainment marketing meant or what it was. I just thought it sounded fun and creative and knew that creativity was super important to me in my future career. And so I ended up taking a class in college called Business in the Entertainment Industry, where I met another student who had interned at DreamWorks Animation when they used to have a Northern California office. And she introduced me to the recruiters there. And I knew nothing about the animation industry, but I thought it sounded super interesting, so I went for it. I first interned at DreamWorks Animation in their HR department. And then while I was there, I was like, I love this company. This is so cool. Like, I can't believe this is how animated movies get made. But like, I was very much on the ground floor of the building, and all the productions were happening upstairs. And I was like, what are they doing up there? I need to find out. So I talked to some people about what production was. I had no idea it even existed. And then I thought it sounded great. And so I went back for a second internship there in production. And once I did that, I was like, this is incredible. Like, I get to be in the vicinity of so many mind-blowingly talented artists. And I just want to be in their presence and like see what they do every day. And so that's when I decided I was going to do animation production, and I set my mind to it. But of course, I think like most people, I graduated college and had a really hard time finding a job. And then eventually someone I knew recommended I reached out on LinkedIn to Allison Mann, who is actually one of the founders of the BRIC Foundation. And I was lucky enough to get to speak with her, and she happened to be hiring an assistant at that time. So I became her assistant, and that was at Paramount Animation. After that, one of my other bosses from Paramount Animation wanted to direct a movie, so he went off to do that, and he knew I wanted to do production, so I followed him, and I worked on that movie in production for 3 years. As a director's assistant the whole time, but also as a general production office coordinator and then a script and story coordinator. And during that experience, the producer of the movie used to work in development for Illumination, and he taught me all about what development was. I had never even heard of it before. And I just realized that sitting in those script and story meetings and working with the writers and the storyboard artists to figure out what the story of the video was going to be was where my real passion lied. And I realized that development was the way to get to be very close to that. And so I convinced the company I was working for at the time to let me do some development work for them. And then eventually I moved back to Los Angeles. I was working in Montreal at the time. And I actually kind of took a step backwards to become an assistant again, but it was because I wanted to work for Sony Animation so badly. Spider-Verse had just come out, the first one, and I was like, this place is incredible. Like this, they seem to be making the coolest stuff, in my opinion. I was just blown away by the first Spider-Verse. And I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to get in there. So I became an assistant to a development executive at Sony Animation. I did that for 2 years before eventually getting promoted to creative executive. And so you might be wondering what a creative executive is, because it's kind of a confusing title. But a creative executive or a development executive is basically like a suit for the studio, except that in the animation industry, we definitely don't wear suits. It's super casual. But we are employees of the studio that know and understand the studio's goals in terms of what kind of movies the studio would like to make. And then we communicate those goals and priorities to creatives like writers and directors. We usually work across multiple movies or TV series to keep a very high level overview of everything, as opposed to, say, a creative producer who might only focus on one project at a time. So we kind of are able to balance like, oh, we're doing this on this movie over here, so maybe we should avoid that on this movie, and that kind of stuff. And when you hear creatives complaining about studio notes, that is us. Although at Sony Animation, we try to be super creator driven and good about that stuff. But yeah, I'm sure you'll hear a lot about that throughout your career. So what do we do exactly? Development is essentially everything that comes before a project greenlit. So everything from creating relationships to hearing their pitches, and then if we like the pitch, to getting the script ready, doing some visual development artwork, whatever kind of is needed, and it differs from studio to studio to eventually get that green light. Is what we do. We drive projects through those various stages. And then once the project is greenlit, usually we'll remain on the project But that's when like producers come in, and once they actually start making the movie, we tend to be a little bit more hands off at that point. But yeah, I mean, um for us at Sony Animation, the process is very script driven. So it can take anywhere from a year to many years of just getting that script to be as good as possible before we get the go ahead to start making the movie. Like I mentioned, we do this for many projects at a time. And I would say that my days are spent about probably 70% working on the projects that I already have going. So once I got promoted to creative executive, I was put on, I think, about 11 to 12 projects, all in various stages. So some that were much further along than others. And so I would say about 70% of my job is making sure those projects have what they need to move forward. And then the other 30% is just meeting with talent, um, and getting to know them, and hearing their pitches to discover new talent and to bring in new projects to the studio. And with that kind of comes just keeping a pulse on the industry, and a lot of reading scripts and knowing who the talented people out there are. A lot of watching other movies and TV shows just to keep an eye on who's making cool stuff. And also, what seems to be working or not working in the competitive landscape. Um, so yeah, I say that's a pretty good description of how I fill my days. Um, so what about development at Sony Animation in particular, the kind of stuff we're looking for? Obviously, we're most known for our big theatrical family animated features like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the whole Hotel Transylvania series, and another one that came out for us recently was Mitchell's versus the Machines, which actually came out on Netflix instead of in theaters, but that was purely because of the pandemic. But I think you can see from those movies that we don't really have a house style. And Sony Animation doesn't have as strong of a brand as some other studios do. And it's actually a really cool thing because then we get to make projects that look as different from the last project as possible. We can do projects in all different tones for all different audiences. And that's kind of been our MO recently, is just kind of pushing what animation is as a medium forward, pushing boundaries as far as who animation is for. We're definitely developing a lot more family theatrical features, but we're also are interested in R-rated features. We're interested in horror. We are on the series side, in the adult animation space, as well as um, kind of this like Stranger Things 4-quadrant space where everybody can watch it together. So we're real believers that animation is a medium for storytelling and not a genre, and that you can tell any story in animation. And we try to reflect that in the movies we put out, and in the movies we develop. So yeah. I wanted to share a little bit about what we look for when we consider developing a new feature or series idea. And I know at the beginning it said I work mostly on the series side, but I actually am mostly on the feature side, but also have some series. And at Sony Animation in particular, we don't split up between features and series. Most of our execs work on both. So that actually makes my job very fun because I get to hear pitches for both features and series. But what I'm about to show you is a little bit skewed towards series, but it works for features as well. So it's just kind of saying when we hear a pitch from either a writer or a director or truly anybody, these are the things we're asking ourselves and the things that we're looking for. So first up is concept. And this is absolutely the most important part. It seems so basic, but like we can kind of tell just from the like log line if what you're pitching is makes sense for our slate or not. So it's really important to get that across as simply as you possibly can. The concept is the idea of your movie, and it's really important that it feels unique and fresh while also still maintaining global appeal. Um, we always are asking ourselves if the concept we're hearing allows us to explore intriguing new worlds that we haven't seen before, and that if it will speak to global audiences. So it wouldn't just resonate in the US, but it resonates with people across the world. Um, and kind of baked into the concept is tone. So a lot of times creators will provide tonal comparisons or comps. So that means just pointing to other movies that have a similar tone as yours, whether that's a very sweet and um, more soft tone or more biting, cynical tone, or just helping us get a gauge on what your movie is going to feel like. And and then also being surprising and innovative. I mean, I think it's kind of obvious and we're probably all feeling it, but there's just so much content out there and there's so many different things trying to steal our attention, not just in movies and TV shows, but just on the internet and, gaming and TikTok even. So in order to stand out in that marketplace, it feels like more and more things have to be completely fresh and innovative. And, audiences want something understandably that they haven't seen before. So that is usually real. I mean, that is very crucial to us. And then I'd also include in this section just like reminding whoever you're pitching to what exactly you're pitching. So if it's a series, I would recommend saying up top that you're pitching an adult animated series or a kids animated series. How long you imagine each episode to be, whether you see it as being episodic or serialized, which I will get to a little bit later. And sometimes I get to the end of the pitch and I'm going like, I can't really tell if that was a feature or a series or not. So it sounds so basic, but like just being as clear as possible up top is super, super helpful. So next up is themes. And for us, this really boils down to personal connection. Like I think concept and why you are the person to tell this story and why you want to tell this story are like the two biggest things we look for when we're hearing pitches. Like what are you trying to say? Why do you want to tell this story now? And why will audiences connect to this story now? Why is it relevant? And you know, for example, for Mitchell's versus the Machines, Mike Rianda, the director of that movie, that's his family in that movie. That's about, I mean, even though he made the main character female, like that is 100% his relationship with his dad. I saw his family when they came to the rap party and I was like, oh my God, that's so weird. Those are just these characters. And so we tend to believe that the more personal a story is, actually, the more universal it becomes. So the more rooted in something true it is, the better in our minds. So I think that's probably the second most important thing to say in your pitch. And obviously important is characters. Besides a new and fresh concept, knowing what the character relationship is at the center of your movie and making sure that that's a fresh character relationship that we haven't seen before is of extreme importance. Or even if it is a character dynamic that we have seen before, like what is fresh and new about your characters in particular that will make, you know, archetypes that have always worked throughout time feel new to audiences. So I think answering who your main characters are and who your central relationship is in the movie or the series that will be driving the movie forward is super important. We talk a lot here about how most movies are romantic comedies actually, and that it's usually there's a relationship to point to that's um coming together and falling apart and coming together again throughout the movie, and we want to know what that is in your project, and what that growth and development in that relationship will look like. Um and yeah, like I mentioned, the relatability leading to universality. It's like somehow the more specific you are, the more universal it ends up feeling. Next up is the world, which is pretty self-explanatory, but just making sure you're taking us to one, a world that feels deserving of a theatrical release and deserving of being seen on the big screen. You know, why is this better to be seen in theaters than at home on streaming? And then, you know, kind of getting into the rules of the universe, how it works, how it relates to our world, if it is a different one. You definitely don't want to get too bogged down in rules and explaining the world and stuff. I've seen pitches go off the rails where they get really the creator gets really into pitching like the how magic works in the world or the rules of the magic, and neglects other areas like characters and stuff. So don't get too caught up in that, but it is usually helpful to help orient us. And then yeah, how characters interact with the world. And I will say too, when we say world, it doesn't necessarily mean like Alice in Wonderland where you're like going into a different world in Act 2. It could just be within our world, but we're seeing it completely differently than we've ever seen it before. Or for example, in the movie Bug's Life, like you're down with the bugs, seeing our world in a completely new way. So that's kind of what we mean by world. Um, this slide has more to do with series. So how are you going to tell your story? How will your story play out over the course of a season and then beyond? How do you imagine it going into seasons 2 and 3? And will your stories be episodic or serialized? And what that means, episodic means kind of like a traditional sitcom. Like you can drop in, an audience can drop in at any moment and they're not missing any context or any exposition. They can just know nothing about the show and still enjoy the episode. Each episode kind of resets in a way at the end and has nothing to do with the last one. Versus a serialized show is like, if you came in the middle or at the end, you would be super confused what was going on. You need all the context. Usually episodes end with some kind of cliffhanger that leads you into the next episode. So yeah, they're very different setups. We're actually working on one of our first episodic shows at the moment. Most of the stuff we've done up to this point has been serialized, and it's just interesting. It's really been a fun experience to be like, okay, what does that mean? Like, we just have to have fun characters, essentially, whose dynamics can play off of each other in fun ways for hundreds and hundreds of episodes. And we don't need to figure out how they're changing and developing or growing as characters. They just need to have like fun with each other, and you need to be able to come in at any moment and enjoy it. And so that feels like a very different setup than a serialized show, but it's equally as fun to figure out. And it's the same thing if you're pitching a feature to us. I wouldn't go too into detail on what the plot is, but you should definitely have a sense of like the beginning, the middle, end. what the character arc is throughout the movie, and yeah, what those major like changes for your characters are throughout. But definitely, you know, I've heard pitches where they really go into detail on plot, and sometimes that ends up just going over our heads. So yeah, no need to do that. Plus, I will say that the animation development process is so long and so collaborative that it will probably end up changing by the time you get to the green light or by the time the movie comes out. So that's why I say it really comes down to concept um, as the North Star of the project, because we know all those plot details will end up changing at some point in the process. And kind of the last thing on this list is animation style. And you don't have to have this totally figured out when you come in for the pitch. If you do have something very specific in your mind, we love to hear what it is. If you're not an artist yourself, which I very much am not, so I totally understand, you can just make a Pinterest board kind of thing for yourself, like pull visual reference from online and pull from other movies that you admire and what they've done with their design language. And you know, just let us into your thinking about that, but you don't at all have to have artwork done when you come into pitch. You know, if we decide to take on the project, that's absolutely what we would be helping you with, is finding you artists to work with and helping you figure out what the look of the movie is going to be. But that said, something we're always asking ourselves when we hear a pitch is why animation? And it's kind of this weird, tricky question because, um, on the one hand, we believe any movie can be animated and any story can be animated. And on the other hand, you kind of want your story to take advantage of the craft and of the medium as much as possible. You don't want it to feel like this could have been done in live action and they just made it animated because there was a pandemic going on or something like that. So it is a really important question to us as far as like, how does this idea take advantage of animation itself? And some other things to think about when you come into pitch that are nice to have, but not necessarily, not totally necessary, are your title and having a strong title. I mean, that kind of thing changes a million times throughout the process as well. So don't worry too much about it, but you know, it never hurts. What music will look like in your project. You know, if it's a musical, um, will the music move the story forward? Is it didactic or not? And if it's not a musical, still, like, what is the musical personality of your project? And because that is such, I mean, in the best movies, it is, the music is basically its own character. So um, it could be a very interesting part of your pitch. Talent, usually you don't at all have to have talent attached. Again, that's where we can come in and help. You don't have to have casting figured out. That's something that happens later. But if you did have somebody in mind, or, you know, sometimes in pitches we'll say, like, the voice of this person to help you help the person hearing the pitch um imagine what that character sounds like. And sometimes that doesn't even have to be an actor itself. It could be pointing towards another character in a different movie or series, just to get quickly across who that character is. Um, a memorable sequence. So is there a memorable sequence you're able to share that's like sometimes for creators, it's like, I don't even know what the movie is yet, but I know this scene. I came up with this scene, and this to me is the heart of the movie. This is the North Star of the movie. So sometimes, again, you do not have to do this, but sometimes that helps get across tone. it helps get across, you know, it helps us understand you as a creator and how you're going to execute this idea. And just helps really like hone in and drive what the heart of the project is. Um, and yeah, I think that's about all as far as, again, these, you don't have to have these things figured out, but it never hurts. And so just a little bit more about all of this, because it's interesting. We at Sony Animation, we buy movies to develop them and then hopefully get a theatrical green light. But we also don't have a streaming service or a network, so we are sellers on the TV side of things. So we bring in pitches, we develop them for series, and then we still need to take them out and sell them to Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or whoever it is. So just as much as you're pitching to us, we also have to go out and pitch series too. So it's really nice. It gives us good perspective on what we're looking for. So again, the things that are important are title, log line. You know, if you can't describe your movie succinctly in a quick elevator pitch, then I don't know, you should take a look at it again and rethink it, because most great concepts can be described very quickly. The format, and that again is what I was talking about as far as, is it a series, is it a feature, is it a limited series, is it episodic, serialized, that kind of thing. The themes, tone, world, characters, pilot summary, and episode springboard. So that's specifically for a series. If you're pitching a series, you should go in depth on what you see the pilot being, the first episode, and then you should just very quickly give, I'd say, 3 to 7 examples of what other episodes would look like. And when I say episode springboards, I just mean like 1 to 2 to 3 sentences describing what an example episode would be. And then in addition to those things, just a quick overview of season 1, especially if it's serialized, how the character changes over the course of the season, and then a quick overview of future seasons. Even if you haven't really figured those out yet, that's totally fine. But just like kind of what you see in your head is definitely helpful. Another huge thing is knowing your audience. So for example, we don't do any preschool shows. So if you came to us with a preschool pitch, we'd be like, great, that was super fun and cute, but like we can't do it. So it's kind of a waste of everybody's time. So make sure, I'd say this is very crucial to do some research on who you're pitching to, you know, as much as you can. I know this is annoying, but as much as you can, cater your pitch towards whoever you're pitching to. Look at what the projects they've worked on in the past, research them, Google them, read what projects they've announced that are coming up in the future. And just, you know kind of like, if you're pitching to Disney, know what a Disney project kind of feels like and what would fit in their brand. Like, you're probably not going to pitch an R-rated comedy to Disney. Versus us, you could definitely pitch an R-rated comedy to us. So that's kind of what I mean when I say know your audience. And then I would just say too, like, because we are pitching ourselves, we aim to never have our pitches be more than 30 minutes. Honestly, 15 to 20 minutes is even better. That leaves time to, talk things through. And it's honestly usually better if more information can come out as a conversation and a dialogue. And you're really just giving a very brief overview. Again, you don't have to talk through the whole plot or anything. But I'd say 15 to 20 minutes is the best, 30 minutes max. And then I wanted to also share with you the materials for a show that it was the first project that I worked on at Sony. I worked very closely on it day to day. And it is something that was pitched to us. Then we developed it and ultimately sold it to Netflix, and now it's out. It was our first series we ever made. And it's called Agent Elvis. You could go watch it on Netflix today. But this is kind of some original artwork from it. It used to be called Agent King. And then in the process of working with Netflix, on what kind of title would grab people as people are scrolling through Netflix, Agent Elvis got the idea across much more clearly. So that's why it got changed. But Agent Elvis was created by Priscilla Presley and John Eddy. It's an adult animated action comedy that tells the story of Elvis Presley, who is covertly inducted into a secret government spy program to help battle the dark forces that threaten the country he loves, all while holding down his day job as king of rock and roll. So that was kind of the log line that sold us on it. So it's essentially the untold story behind this photo, which is a very real photo. Elvis Presley showed up to the White House one day and demanded a meeting with Nixon at the time, and was let in because he's Elvis Presley. And, people forever looked at this picture and said, oh, maybe there's some bigger conspiracy going on behind the scenes. And our show says, what if there really was? Elvis at some point in his life was given this fake narcotics badge. And our show essentially asks, what if it wasn't fake? So it's set in the world of the US in the 1960s and 70s. It has references and cameos from real people at the time. And for us, a huge part of our love of the show came from the artwork of this incredible artist named Robert Valley. You should look him up. His artwork is insane. And he helped us find the early look of the show, which you can see some of it here. You know, in the end, we had to take what Robert Valley did and, make it producible on a budget for however many episodes, but this was like our North Star as far as what we wanted the show to look like. So yeah, I just wanted to share some of that with you. And the project came to us from Priscilla Presley and this creator named John Eddy, and they basically came with the concept, and we were like, that's super fun, we love that. And then we worked with them to help figure out, they came to us with ideas of what each of the episodes were and stuff like that, but we really sat with them. We hired other writers who were experienced in the series animation space, and we sat with them and essentially broke each of I think there's 10 episodes, and what those would look like, and wrote the scripts, and we ended up being successful in selling this one to Netflix. So yeah, I thought it would just be kind of fun for you to see some of the early artwork that was done. It's definitely very R-rated. There's a very inappropriate monkey character in it who is actually Elvis, based on Elvis's real life monkey. Yeah, so I thought it'd be fun for you to see some of this artwork. Here he is kicking Charles Manson in the head. And then you could go on Netflix and see how the show actually turned out. But yeah, so we pitched this to Netflix, and then basically from the time I started working at Sony Animation, which was at the end of 2019, to March 2023, I think, we were either developing or in production on this show. This is an example of a physical leave behind that we left with the pitch. It's sometimes that used to be even more common when pitches were more in person, that you would come with some kind of cute little thing that you could leave behind with execs. Now a lot of pitches are virtual. It never really was necessary anyways, but it was always just fun. But yeah, here you can see some of the pages of the pitch Bible that was given to us. They included a little bit of the script, I think, just to show some of the tone, but usually unnecessary. And yeah, you can see outline of season 1, who the characters were, which, you know, a lot of this stuff ended up changing, but again, all we need to know is like the concept and like the starting place, and everything is always evolving from there. So these are kind of examples of those springboard episodes that I mentioned, like a very quick description of like what episodes 2, 3, 4, 5 would look like. They did it for all the episodes. You definitely don't need to do that. And then quick descriptions of season 2. Again, they went really way more in depth than they needed to. Season 3. Here was another page I wanted to share. You know, spy gadgets ended up being a huge part of this show. It's fun to see Elvis like James Bond with a jetpack and stuff. So, they just did an extra page on this because it felt like gadgets kind of were their own character within the show. So again, not necessary, but just a fun little add-on. And yeah, fast forward, and now you can go watch the show on Netflix. And that's kind of the end of my presentation. So I'd be very curious to know if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much for that fantastic presentation, Chelsea, and for the behind the scenes on Agent Elvis. That was so cool to see the pages from that pitch Bible.
Yeah, of course, of course.
All right, we've got our first question here from an anonymous attendee who asks, what current trends in the animation industry are you most excited about? Additionally, how do you see the future of animation evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh my gosh.
Good
Um,
question.
yeah, very good question. I feel like if I knew, I would be a millionaire, but for me, again, I think, and again, this was never an issue in anime, but it's a more Western animation that I'm talking about, but people are just starting to be a little bit more open-minded to who animation is for and that it's not just for kids. So I'm excited to see more animated projects that are for all ages. I also think that you know, the budgets for theatrical animated features were getting super high, and actually this is not just for animation, it's kind of across the board for theatrical features. The budgets have gotten super high in a way that makes them feel like even bigger risks, because it's hard to make that money back in theaters. So I imagine that the budgets are going to start to come down a little bit, but I actually think that's an interesting thing because with a lower budget, you can take much more risks. Um, and you know, we haven't figured it out yet, but like horror is something our group is super interested in. Horror movies are usually super low budget. So what does that mean for us? But just in bringing down the cost and you know, we not to say we wouldn't keep doing our very high budget Sony Pictures ImageWorks movies because those are super important too, but like just having more of a wide range of the kinds of movies we make just allows us to make more and make really different kinds of things. So I'm kind of excited to see, at least for us at Sony Animation, where that leads us in the future.
Yeah, I love what you said about how, you know, Sony Pictures Animation really sees animation as a medium more than a genre. So really exciting to see how that'll evolve into even more stories being told in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember at the Oscars a couple years ago, there was an animated documentary that was about, you know, a refugee from war that was fleeing. I think it was called Flee. And in the category, up for an Oscar award, and it was a beautiful documentary. And then at the Oscars that year, the announcers for the animation category just went up dressed as princesses, and they like made some joke about like animating movies being awful to watch when you had to watch them like a million times over because your kids wanted to watch them a million times. And I was like, that just feels so disrespectful
Yep.
to the industry. And you know, look at the category. There's like all different kinds of movies in the category this year. So absolutely we're trying to change that conversation, and a lot of that came from Spider-Verse. And you know, for the first time, kind of um teenagers and young adults with no children came to see an animated movie in theaters, and more we want to replicate that, and we want all of our movies, even if they're for families, to feel aged up, and try to bring in all different types of people.
Love that. All right, we have Ava who asks, is there a way to submit my pitch? Chelsea, do you have any advice for those who may have a pitch idea?
Yeah, that is a super good question. It's like the question everybody wonders. You know, for us as a company, we don't take unsolicited pitches. I know that's like a tough pill to swallow, but the best way to go about pitching is to get a representative. And what I mean by that is a talent agent or manager. And I know that's much easier said than done. And it is something that you kind of build towards over the course of your career. So there's a couple ways to do that. It's usually you know, doing the kind of festival circuit route, or submitting to programs. Like I know Nickelodeon has a great writing program and a great pitch program, things like that. That definitely gets you noticed by talent agents and managers. Um, Another way is just to, you know, I recommend to everybody just to get in. Just like get in anywhere you can. And then, like, once you're in, you start meeting people. Like, we hear pitches internally from employees all the time, and it doesn't matter if they're a production assistant or if they're a director, you know? So so just getting in, networking, getting to know people, even if it's not the exact job that you wanted, or it feels kind of like off of the path you were going for, just do it. You'll start meeting people, you'll start networking. You can always change jobs later. You might even find out that you're interested in something different than you originally thought. Um, and that's honestly the best way to, one, gain some experience, because experience will definitely make you think of your pitch differently and will help you shape your idea. But yeah, just help you meet the right people to be able to pitch to.
Great answer. Speaking of getting your way into that door, whatever that door may be, Jojo had asked, when moving into creative development, what is one skill or experience in that transition that surprised you?
That's a good question. I would say not well, working with people and having to be personable and having to work with talent. And, you know, sometimes work with talent in a situation where they're receiving notes that they don't like, or that, you know, in any giant creative project, there's always going to be times where like people see things differently, whether that's like the director and the art director seeing things differently, or there's always going to be times where, you know, everyone's feels so passionate about this, and, you know, people aren't seeing eye to eye or something. So just that kind of, honestly, like that, those soft skills to be able to like talk to people, to connect with people, to be able to really listen to how they're feeling. Like you end up like acting like a therapist a lot of times. Which honestly I enjoy, and like it's like part of the job is we're helping make these movies, and we're helping make people's visions come to fruition, and that means, like being emotional support to them sometimes. And so that I would say is sometimes a bit of a surprising part of the job. But another skill that I would recommend that is maybe not so surprising is just like having an understanding of story and story structure and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of great books you can read out there. There's master classes you can take. Just like kind of making yourself knowledgeable on that stuff. And then of course, taking all that in and then not kind of throwing it out the door, because, if everybody stuck to the rules too much when it comes to story, everything would be too formulaic and boring to watch. Um, so, yeah, but having some kind of background of that stuff is definitely helpful, and that can also just come from watching a lot, watch anything and everything, dissect it, analyze it, and yeah.
That's great. Those are amazing skills to have, especially if one wants to work in development like you. Emmett asked, as an executive, how do you balance your time between multiple pitches or projects effectively?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to be honest. I feel like my brain's like everywhere at any moment, but it's kind of crazy because I look at my bosses and their bosses and they have even more projects than I do. So, I think it is just a rhythm that you get into eventually. And I just honestly, I have a list of all my projects and I probably look at it multiple times a day and I'm like, okay, this project, what needs to be done for this? This project, what needs to be done? And I just go through it and make sure I'm not dropping the ball on anything for any of my projects. And again, in development, that could be a really long process, and some things are a lot more quiet than others. For example, if we find a writer and we launch them to script and then they're off writing the script, just depending on how long that writer takes, it could be a couple months, it could be 6 months. So different projects are like popping up and needing your attention at different times. Um, and um, and yeah, like I have one project that's in production that ends up taking a lot of my time versus some that are super early on that I only have to check in on every once in a while. So it varies. Of course, things tend to come in waves, and it will be like three different projects of mine scripts will come in at the same time, and it's like, why can't these have all been spaced out? But that's just how the world works.
If only we could predict those up and downs,
Yeah,
ups and downs.
exactly.
Claudia asks, how long was the gap between graduation and landing your first job? How have you planned your career path after college? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So I graduated in May of 2014. And then I got a job in October of 2014, actually. Um, Scanning papers at Warner Brothers. I was literally just scanning papers for the finance department. Like, I don't even know what that department did, couldn't tell you. And I was like, I just graduated from Berkeley and now I'm just scanning papers. But honestly, looking back, I had a super fun time doing it and like met a lot of cool people there. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of hard to find. I didn't know anybody in the animation industry. I had done those 2 internships at DreamWorks up in the Bay Area, but then the DreamWorks office that was up there closed down, like literally right when I was graduating. So everybody I kind of knew from those jobs, like was leaving and doing other things. Um, yeah, I just kind of like hunkered down and like met with anybody and everybody I knew that was like slightly related to the entertainment industry, because I was like, maybe even if this isn't super related, like you could point me to somebody, you might know someone else who knows somebody, and just did like, I remember a billion like informational coffees with people, just trying to learn as much as possible and, figure out a way in. And then it just takes like that one chance to work out where the timing is right and somebody's looking for somebody and like you had just met with them. So yeah, I definitely have faced that multiple times in my career where it like feels hopeless and you're just like, why am I doing so many coffees? But hang in there because it's like the right thing to do 100%, and you will find something eventually. And I don't know if I answered that question, and I can't remember the second part of it.
The second part was, how have you planned your career path after college?
Oh, um, I don't know that I even planned that much. I I kind of just remember being like, production, I'm gonna do production, and like would get in this like rut of like, I have to figure out how to do production. And then like I found out what development was, and I was like, okay, now I'm doing development. And I like um just like put my mind towards that. But even now, I mean, well, I guess now I'm super happy with what I'm doing. I really love this job. I really love Sony Animation and the people I work with. So I'm very content to just keep doing this and, like moving up that ladder, whatever it means. Um, but I don't know. I personally have never like planned too much, and it seems kind of hard to do in the entertainment industry anyways, because you never know what opportunities are going to come along, and people have all sorts of windy paths to getting towards where they want to go. And it's kind of part of the fun too.
Yes, I love the whole normalization of the windy path.
Yeah, totally. Well, you just like, I didn't know development existed until I started working in production and someone told me about it, and then I went that way. It's like you never know what you're going to learn, and what you'll fall in
Exactly.
love with.
Speaking of windy paths and transitions, Uma had asked, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. How can an animator shift towards being a producer? Any advice about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say just keep applying to um production jobs, whether that's a production assistant or a production coordinator. Um, just getting in on those kind of entry level positions and then working your way, getting that experience and seeing what all the different departments do. And then working your way up from there. And again, I've seen a lot of people just get in one position, and then once they're in, they shift to something else. Like get in is like um any kind of assistant that you can. And then like once you're in there, obviously like do a good job at your job, but like talk to people, like learn about other pathways and make it very clear if you want to do production that that's what you're interested in. And if they like you and they want to support your career, they'll help you move towards that direction. So, yeah, I'm a big proponent on just like, even if it's not exactly what you wanted to do, just go for it, get in the door, and then be loud about what it is you actually want to do.
I love that advice. Being loud about what you want to do, because people won't know until you tell them.
They would never know otherwise. You have to, and I get that sometimes it can feel weird. And always like do it in a way where, like do your normal job first, but once you're settled, once you make friends and once you find mentors and stuff, then be very loud about what you want.
Great advice. Chelsea, I know we're right up against time. If you have any final pieces of advice for our group about getting into development or any advice in general, please let us know.
Oh, I don't know that I have anything very profound to say, but Just that if you love animation, if you're passionate about it, just keep with it. I've definitely been right there in terms of like having trouble finding jobs and you know, feeling kind of hopeless or desperate, and it will happen if you're just determined and persistent and you work your butt off. So yeah, hang in there. You will get there. And thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us. I loved hearing about your story and about really how you've broken down what development is as a job. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Cool. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Look out for the recording on BRIC's YouTube page in about a week.
Cool.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.